Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us at our SEND webinar. Today is all about sharing information on the latest SEND developments in Wiltshire and also hearing from you. Next slide, please, Dom. If you need to use closed captions or subtitles, please click on the CC button, which you can find at the bottom corner of your screen. This will turn on closed captions and subtitles for the speaker's words. You can also change the caption language by selecting Settings, Captions/Subtitles, and choosing the language that you want. Please be aware that this function is not available, unfortunately, on the Teams app for mobile devices. Okay, so on with the webinar. I'd like to pass over to Catherine Davis, our Director for Education and Skills, to talk about the SEND and AP strategy and our work. Thank you. And next slide, please.
Thanks, Jerry. I'm really pleased to welcome you to today's webinar. My name's Catherine. I'm the Director for Education and Skills at Wiltshire Council. Dom, if you could move on to the next slide, please, that would be really helpful. So we really appreciate you giving up your time to join us today for today's online webinar. And what we're hoping to achieve today is to share with you some information about our new co-produced SEND Inclusion and AP strategy, Meeting Needs Together, Ambitious for All. And now that we have got our priorities identified as part of that strategy, the really important thing for us is to make sure that through the implementation and putting that strategy into practice, we are making sure that we are sense checking at every step of the way with our parents and carers to ensure that we're getting things right, not just at the beginning when we're setting out those priorities, but as we're delivering against what we intend to do. So thank you for joining us this afternoon. We'll think about putting words into action, and the really important thing for us today is going to be hearing from you as well. So you'll see that there's a Q&A section as part of this webinar. You can ask questions in the chat as we are presenting, and we will answer those questions as quickly and as efficiently as we can during the webinar. There will also be some time for questions and answers at the end. So when we finish presenting the slides, for you to ask questions in the chat. Again, popping those into the chat area allows us to see those. And if we run out of time in today's hour of time that we've got dedicated for this webinar, what we'll do is we'll publish the answers to those questions on our local offer for you to review later. Can I have the next slide, please, Dom? So I've just mentioned that our new SEND and AP strategy is called Meeting Needs Together, Ambitious for All. And this is a strategy that has been built during the last year to ensure that as a local area partnership, so across education, health and social care, we are working together to understand how best to meet the needs of our children and families with SEND. And the second part of the title of our strategy, Ambitious for All, is also really important because we wanted to make sure that this wasn't only about meeting needs, it was also about our ambition for children and families with SEND. So there are some priorities that I'm going to hand over to my colleague Ben in a moment to talk about, but more broadly, I just want to share with you what those themes look like. So one of the things that we have committed to in our strategy, having heard from parents and carers through co-production, is how important it is that we put children and families at the heart of our planning. And during co-production, we heard really clearly from children and from families about what that looks like when it happens well, but also when things don't happen in that way, where we do have children and families at the heart of the planning. If that isn't working in the best way possible, what a significant impact that can have for children and families. So we've been really clear about that as a priority for us, that children and their families sit at the heart of any planning that we're doing within our work around supporting children with SEND. The second priority is about the right support at the right time, and this is making sure that at whatever level of need a child or young person has, that we are making sure that we are working in partnership to secure the right support at the right time, whether that's an early help and an early support position, whether that's in the statutory assessment part of the SEND system in terms of education, health and care needs assessments and plans, or whether we're talking about preparation for adulthood and as our young people move into that post-16 space up until the age of 25. We also heard really strongly from everybody about how important it was that planning for children and young people was timely. And again, that being at every level. So you'll see how that links to the previous priority around right support at the right time. So making sure that we're working together and to put in place the right plans for children and young people to support transition or to support achieving the outcomes that we are being ambitious for children and young people. We've also been told about how important good communication is, and that also sits at the heart of our new strategy. We know there are occasions when communication with families could and should be improved, and we're committed to that. And we also know what a difference it makes when professionals work well together for you, so that you're not having to tell your family story multiple times. Again, you'll see how that is at the centre of our new strategy. And preparing for adulthood, making sure we've got the best support and the right support in place as we prepare our young people for adulthood, and recognising that that preparation starts really early, and that is also borne out in our strategy. So now we're putting that plan into action. We heard over a number of months what those priorities needed to be. We spoke to settings and schools, and we spoke to parents and carers, and we spoke to children, and we did that across the partnership, education, health and social care. And now we're at the point of implementation. This is a strategy that's going to run from 2024 through to 2029. And we will be sense checking, as I said, and holding ourselves to account around delivery on this all the way through the life of that strategy. Could I have the next slide, please, Dom? So at this point, I'm really pleased to be able to hand over to Ben, who has got some responsibilities in the council around leading around our SEND inclusion and alternative provision transformation. And Ben's going to lead us through the next part of this session. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, Catherine. Yes, as Catherine said, I'm the Inclusion, SEND and AP Transformation Lead, which means I'm in charge of all of the work that we're doing to change things across SEND and with the SEND team, but also with the teams that go and work directly in schools and with other teams across the council, children's social care and so on, because we know that in order to get this right, it's got to be a whole system approach. If we go to the next slide, please. So as Catherine pointed out, we did a lot of work on pulling together the strategy. A lot of that work was done with schools and with parent carers and with other stakeholders to understand what the priorities were. And those went into the strategy and remain the strategic aims of our system. But alongside that, when we start thinking about how we're going to turn that into a deliverable plan, how we're going to actually start doing that stuff, we then need to think about how we combine that with the National SEND and AP Improvement Plan, with the Council's business plan, with the AP Improvement Strategy that already exists, with the NHS's strategic plans, with HCRG, who are the community care provider, with all their strategic plans, so that we end up with one plan that we can all be following and all pulling in the same direction to make sure that we're improving things for children and young people with SEND and for their families. So putting all that together gave us these 6 priorities for our transformation programme. The first one is around the voice of child and their family. And as Catherine already touched on, ensuring that we hear that from the lived experience of children and young people and their families, and that we are listening to that and responding to that and adapting our plan as we go in response to that really has to stay at the heart of the transformation programme. And so that's our priority number one. Priority number two is about improving support skills and practice. We want to make sure that there's the right support in place for children and young people, even before they need an EHCP, when they're still at that SEND support level, so that we can be confident that those children and young people are receiving the support they need, and that the professionals in our system, the teachers, the doctors, the GPs, the physiotherapists, the occupational therapists, all those other professionals that children and young people might come in contact with, have the right skills and understanding of what SEND need looks like and how they can support those children in the best possible way. The third priority is about the right support at the right time. We know how important it is to make sure that children and young people get the right support they need and get it when they need it and not late. And so there's a lot of work going into making sure that that's happening. And some of the focus around that is making sure that we reduce any need to escalate to independent special school. Those independent special schools are often long distances away from home, maybe a 45-minute taxi ride there, 45-minute taxi ride back. Doesn't seem like the best way to support children and young people with SEND. So we're trying to make sure that we can keep as much of that support as local as possible. The fourth one is preparation for adulthood, and this came through very, very strongly in all the engagement work that we did with parent carers about facilitating and supporting positive transition away from an EHCP and into a fulfilling adulthood. And that's partly about making sure that there is the right range of options for children and young people, whether that's employment or a supported internship or a supported apprenticeship, or whether that's continuing with their education. We need to make sure that those links are there and that it's really clear what the pathways are that our children and young people can benefit from. The other side of that is about independent living skills and making sure that the support is really in place and that we get away from the cliff edge that can sometimes be perceived as a child moves into adulthood. The fifth one is about financial assurance in our SEND system. And this is about making sure that we know what we're paying for, that we're paying for what we need in our system, and that where we are seeing things costing more, that we are getting value from that. We want to make sure that if we're paying more for a package, that the child or young person is getting outcomes that are better in line with that additional cost. So that's what that one is. And then the sixth one, and the final one, is communications process and culture, which is all about making sure that we are improving communication between key stakeholders in our system and making sure the processes are more efficient and effective. We know that we can be doing better as a council in terms of how we talk to parent carers and to schools and to other partners, and we know that partners could be doing better talking to each other. But sometimes the process going from primary school to secondary school isn't quite as joined up as it should be. And again, we need to make sure that that's part of this, that we're getting all those things right. And ultimately, we want the EHCP process to be as smooth as possible so that those children and young people get the support as quickly as possible and can carry on accessing education in a really productive and meaningful way for them. So the thing I want to emphasize before we move on from this slide is that all of these things are system-wide endeavours. So we have our partnership, which is Wiltshire Council, the NHS Integrated Care Board, HCRG, Wiltshire Parent Carer Council. We have that partnership of very clear bodies, and each one of them has a role within this, whether that's schools working with us around improving support skills and practice to make sure that their teachers and SENCOs are up to date on the latest best practice, and that we're providing the training that schools and SENCOs find useful, and that's informed by what WPCC are hearing from parent carers about what's important to them. that partnership starts to fit together in that area like that, or whether that's about preparation for adulthood, making sure that we are hearing from parent carers what will make them feel confident in the offer, and we're working then with employers and with colleges across Wiltshire to make sure that those options are provided, and the ICB and social care colleagues are making sure that the care packages flow really smoothly. Every single one of these has a role for everyone in our SEND system, and it's only by all of us working together that we'll end up making the improvements we know we need to make. And that's why when we talk about this being a system piece of work, that's why we brought together all of those different plans and strategies to make sure that we had a single plan that could take us forward in delivering this strategy. If I go to the next slide, please. So some of the key points from the consultation when we were consulting on the strategy, which I just wanted to sort of reflect back as a starting point for discussion. So the first thing that came out very strongly from schools and from parent carers was about advice and support, particularly for families and schools. And there were conversations and feedback that we had that parents were looking for more early support strategies at home, more help in those early stages of SEND, and how they could access training or support strategies or help or advice to help at home. Second one was about early support for emergent mental health issues. So before an emotional or mental health issue becomes a problem, a bigger problem, what can we do in those early stages to get the child or young person the help they need? The third one was about practitioners coming into schools and settings for advice, and how helpful it can be to have some experts coming in and working alongside SENCOs in schools to provide that advice directly to them. The fourth one was about recruitment challenges, which is a bit less relevant to parent carers, but it's worth us just touching on nonetheless. There are particular groups of professionals that it's quite difficult to recruit at the moment. For us in the council, educational psychologists are always the one that there seems to be a national shortage of, but schools and SENCOs are again something that is occasionally a challenge around recruitment, and we need to understand how our strategy and the way we deliver that strategy responds to those staff shortages. And then the final one in this area was about online discussion groups of parents and professionals, and again that's partly about getting parents and professionals together so that we can hear both views and that parents can hear from professionals and vice versa about what's happening in our system and how to support children and young people better. The second big theme was about transitions, and I've already talked about this a little bit because it became one of our transformation priorities because of how strongly this came through. But we heard very clearly about the need to find a better range of post-16 options and to ensure that there's timely transition planning so that we're not talking to 16-year-olds about what their option is next month, but we're talking to 13, 14-year-olds about thinking ahead and what maybe might be right for that child or young person when they get there. We heard about opportunities for school staff and for parents to visit post-16 settings, so it might be helpful for parent carers as their child is approaching post-16 study to go and look at Wiltshire College and understand how Wiltshire College works and whether that's right for their child or young person, or go and look at one of the other colleges or post-16 settings to get that understanding of what's required to carry on education there, and also whether that would be right for their young person. And then the last one in this area was about earlier social care contact during preparation for the next stage, and again that's all about smoothing that transition as that young person starts to move from child services to adult services, as we would think of them in the council. There shouldn't appear to be a break the support, and there shouldn't appear to be a significant change. It should feel like a natural transition. That's why we use the word transitions, rather than a sort of a bump in the road. The third big priority area was about communication, and I did want to touch on this one with parent carers in this forum, because so much of that is about how we talk better to parent carers, and how we talk better to how we get information out and how we make information accessible. And so there were bits here about making sure that there was clear information on the local offer, about provisions and provision types and what was available in Wiltshire, and also something about a wider range of specialist provision in Wiltshire with the relevant signposting. And we know that that's something that parent carers have been asking for, and again, that's something that we're really focusing on in this strategy, is about making sure that we've got that wider range of specialist provision, that we're expanding our special schools, that we're introducing more secondary resource-based places, to make sure that all of that provision is available, and with the signposting, that parent carers can understand what those look like and what they can offer. If I can have the next slide, please. So the next part really is about starting to think about how we make this real for parent carers. So if you look on your screens, you should be able to find a box that says Q&A, or a little icon that says Q&A. It looks like two speech bubbles with a question mark in it. And within there, you're able to write stuff that we can then see as presenters for the webinar. So what would be really helpful from our perspective, as we're starting to put this plan together, is for us to get some thoughts from you about the following 3 questions, which will be really valuable in terms of us working out the implementation plan for our strategy. So if you have thoughts and answers to these questions as I start to run through them, if you could just type them into that Q&A box, and then we'll have them all on record, but also I might pull a few out and read them out as we go. So the first question I'd really like some input into is what does more support and training for parent carers look like? We often hear from surveys or from other things that more support and training for parent carers is what parent carers want. But I'd like to get into the specifics about, what particular things would you as a parent carer want more support and training on? How would you like that to be delivered? Would you like that to be online or in smaller groups, face to face? Are there specific areas of the SEND system that you feel you need more support and training on? Are there particular issues that you'd like more support on? The second question, as we start to, I'm sure we'll start to see some answers from that, but the second question as well is, how can we support children approaching post-16 to make sure they're ready to embrace those opportunities? From you as parent carers, what is it that we can offer in terms of supporting young people as they approach post-16, making sure that they understand what the opportunities are, what the pathways are that are open to them, and also how we can make sure that they are able to take up those opportunities and have the kind of independent living skills or independent study skills, I suppose, as well, that would be required to embrace those opportunities. And then the third question that would be really helpful is around early help and family help. How can early help and family help be even more effective in supporting families? What is it that we could offer from our social care teams and those early help, family help spaces that would be valuable to parent carers in terms of additional help and support? I'm going to stop talking for a couple of minutes, just that you have a chance to think without my voice in your head, and then I'll come back and read out some of the responses that we've had.
Okay, thank you very much, Catherine and Ben. So as Ben says, we're going to discuss some of the questions already popping up in the chat. and I'll ask the speakers to pick up the answers for these. There's one here which has come up, which is a question for you, I think, Ben, which is when will you publish the strategy implementation plan?
Thanks, Jerry. So the intention is to publish it very early in the new year, January 2025. We need to do more sessions like this with parent carers. We need to do more work with schools to make sure that we're understanding the stuff that needs to be in the plan properly, and then we'll publish it. The point I do want to make about that, though, is that in order for this to be really effective, it has to be a living document. So there will be quite regular updates to it as we respond to changing situations or changing priorities, or as we identify new things that need to be addressed more urgently. The things that will remain very concrete and consistent will be those strategic priorities, those transformation priorities, and also the outcomes framework that we're developing, which is a bit of a weird concept, but it essentially sets out how we're going to measure our success or not against this strategy, and how we're going to keep ourselves on track in terms of what we're delivering and how that is impacting lives. Because the last thing we want is for this strategy to just be something that sits on a shelf and doesn't actually get done. So that's how we'll manage that.
Thank you. Another question here. You say strategy was created through working with parents and others to make it a joint effort. How will you continue to do this into the future? Catherine, would you be able to answer that one for us?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thank you, Jerry. And I think Ben has already touched on this a little bit, but we are absolutely committed to this being a living and breathing document, not something that sits on a shelf. So we are going to be putting on more events like this, so more webinars, and also thinking about more face-to-face sessions that we can do in local areas with parents and carers where we're checking in. So we have some formal governance boards where we'll be checking about progress against our implementation of the strategy, but outside of those formal governance boards, we also need to make sure that we're talking to parent carers, and we're talking to our schools, and we're talking to our settings to make sure that we are properly being held to account for our delivery against what we've said we are going to do. So you can expect more of these sorts of webinars, but also more face-to-face events too.
Lovely, thank you. Next question we have here is, how are you going to improve responding to parent queries so people aren't left waiting too long for a response? Can I ask Ben to answer that one, please?
You can, but I wonder if Catherine would be better at answering that one.
Yeah,
Catherine.
I'm happy to do that. Thank you. So yeah, we're really absolutely committed. You'll see that communication is a big part of our strategy priorities. And one of the ways that we are looking to improve our response times for families and parents and carers is through the additional investment that we've made, particularly into our statutory SEND team, including the assessment team. So having more SEND lead workers and other roles in those teams so that we're able to better manage the volume of inquiries that comes through, so that as parents and carers you're getting a better experience in terms of quick responses to any questions that you ask, and that you've got your named contact in terms of a SEND lead worker if your child has got an EHCP. If your child is being supported at the SEN support level in school, and you're looking for advice, guidance and information, that we are continuing to invest in how we develop our local offer web pages, but also a new development is in our early help and support space within the local authority, where we'll have a consultation line and specialist early help send workers who will be available to provide advice, information and guidance through a kind of a front door approach, really, around a telephone line, literally a hotline that you can call and seek information and advice. So we're approaching that in different ways. Some of that's about additional investment in staffing. Some of it's about creating new ways in which the parent carers are able to make contact with us, and that advice line is an example of that.
Thank you, Catherine. We've had a comment in here which might lead on from that. So schools need to promote and communicate the help available. From my experience, the SENCO was a barrier to gaining that help.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a really helpful comment, and thank you to the parent carer who left that. And I think you're right that we need to make sure that we're working with all partners like schools to make sure that they understand the help that's available and that they're signposting that in an appropriate way. I think the new teams that we're introducing, like the mainstream inclusion support advisors who are going and working in schools, will be really critical to that, because they will be able to come alongside SENCOs, potentially like the one that you're talking about, and just highlight where there's help and support available for children and young people to access.
Thank you, Ben. Another question here. My child has anxiety around attending school. What type of mental health support do you have? Catherine?
Thanks, Jerry. And I think, just to acknowledge really that that's a really challenging situation for parents and carers when you're experiencing a position where your child is feeling anxious, and that anxiety might be around attending school. So some of you as parent carers might have heard of an acronym called EBSA, Emotionally Based School Absence, or Emotionally Based School Avoidance. It's called different things by different people, and that can sometimes be a really significant barrier to accessing education for children and young people. So our educational psychology service in the council has produced a really helpful toolkit for professionals, but also for parents and carers, about how to support children who might be experiencing anxiety in relation to school attendance. And we have tried to be as creative as we can around how we support families in this space. For example, our family and community learning team are offering a short workshop course on supporting your child with emotionally based school avoidance. We know our colleagues in Silverwood Special School have been running parent workshops on a similar theme that have been really well attended too. And we're also making sure that we work with other teams and services within the council, including, for example, the Education Welfare Service, who will be working with schools around making sure that we're working together to understand when emotional wellbeing and mental health is impacting on attendance, and that we are absolutely adopting a support first approach there. And I think the other important thing to reference is our mental health support teams offer that comes through colleagues in the health service via CAMHS. We are really excited that the coverage of our mental health support teams in Wiltshire is going to be increasing significantly from January onwards due to new investment via NHS England. And that's a really important resource for families and for schools where anxiety or mental health challenges exist at a stage where support is needed, but kind of at a lower intervention level than, say, CAMHS, for example. So those are just a few examples that I think I'd share in answer to that question, Jerry.
Thank you, Catherine. Another question here that's come in about how you'll quality assure the timeframes for queries and questions that are being answered. Will you publish how many queries have been answered and how long it took to get to the final outcome? Is that something perhaps that we would do via our local offer?
I can answer that, Jerry. I think that's a really valid question to ask, actually. So we do publish information as a council around our response times to inquiries and complaints. But if parents and carers would find it helpful to have more information about how we go about our making responses to inquiries, and how successful and impactful our commitment is to improving on that has been, then we will take that away as a suggestion, and we'll have a think about how we might do that. And Jerry, I think that idea about how we comment on that through the local offer is a really good one.
Yes, I agree. Thank you, Catherine. Another question here. What support are you offering neurodiverse children in schools? Ben, can you answer that one for us, please?
Yeah, so there are a number of training sessions that are happening. There's the specialist SEN service. There's autism training that they provide, which is free in schools. And also this year we have begun to roll out the Autism Education Trust training modules as well. We're also working across our partnership with the ICB, the Integrated Care Board, NHS, and with WPCC on the PINS programme. And we've had really good take-up of that, which is some practical interventions around neurodiversity in schools. And so there have been 20 primary schools that have signed up to that, and neurodiversity there is really widely defined, so it includes autism but also quite a few other types of neurodiversity, and it's been really great to see our colleagues from the NHS working alongside Wiltshire Parent Carer Council and working on alongside our schools in delivering some of that, just to really improve that support for neurodiverse pupils in schools.
Thank you, Ben. And I can see that there are some comments in the QA chat around your earlier questions. I'm not sure if you're able to see those, Ben, but I can have a look for you. Gosh, there's lots coming in. That's great. I can see there's one there. It's more of a comment than a question, but useful feedback from anonymous user here. Feedback, parent carer online training and support webinars that you can complete at your own pace, excuse me, and at a time convenient to you. Can you perhaps say a bit more about that, Ben? That idea, I like that idea.
Yeah, I really liked that idea as well. When I saw that come in, that sounds like a really sensible suggestion. I mean, that's how the induction training, when a new starter starts at the council, and I'm sure at most businesses now, that's how that's delivered, is online training that someone can click through at their own pace and absorb at their own pace and do when at a convenient time for them. So I'd be absolutely would be advocating taking a similar approach with some of the parent care of training. I think that'd be really good. And again, the point made by the same in the same comment later on about making sure that we are using all the opportunities to engage with parent carers through surveys and through questionnaires and online email and feedback, and making sure that we're doing all of that, again, is a really helpful comment, because I think we need to be willing to go where parent carers are to ask them their views, rather than assuming they'll come and find us. And I think that we're starting to adopt that as our strategic approach to talking to parent carers, and I'm hoping that parent carers will appreciate a change in that as we take this forward.
Absolutely. And I can see there is a question around asking how the figures of numbers of parents and carers that attended during the consultation process. And I know there were various different ways that happened. Although we don't have those to hand today, we certainly do have them, and can review and share them, publish them on our local offer. So we will do that as part of publishing the questions and answers that we are discussing today. There's a question here, how will you ensure that both the information being published and the offers of support that can be delivered by Wiltshire post-16 providers will meet the needs of young children to attend a local college because they cannot meet needs? And the comment there as well, in addition to that, this should reduce your need for specialist independent colleges, but I cannot see any local way of meeting this current need. How do you plan to increase the local offer? Gosh, long question, really, lots in there, but Catherine, are you able to touch upon that one?
Yeah, it's a really good question and a really appropriate one too, in terms of looking at what we've got available in our post-16 landscape in Wiltshire. We have some really excellent provision offers locally. Equally, we're aware that capacity, it can sometimes be a challenge, so that kind of sufficiency question about have we got enough provision, and we're also aware that for some of our older young people we might not always have enough provision of the right type at post-16. So for example, we might be thinking about some of our young people with more complex needs, where we would be wanting to bring new and develop new provision more locally, closer to home, so that young people can remain in their local communities. So some of the things that we are thinking about and planning in this space are about developing new provision in that post-16 part of our provision offer and landscape, and you will hear more about that as we start to pull that through from our strategy. And again, that will be further conversations with parents and carers, because we're data rich in terms of what we know about the needs of our young people. So in terms of the data we have from our SEND strategic needs assessment, so where we look across the whole of Wiltshire and can understand what the types of needs of young people might be in different parts of the county, but we need to layer on top of that data what our parents and carers are telling us about what are the priorities for them, and what are our young people telling us are the priorities for them as well locally. So what would they want to see in Wiltshire as part of their local opportunities? So some of it is about strengthening and enhancing the good provision that we've already got in Wiltshire. Some of it will be about bringing new provision online as part of our sufficiency and specialist place planning strategy.
Thank you. And I noticed there's a comment coming here around that post-16 support, which I know you've touched on, Catherine, around ensuring that the plan is fit for purpose at post-16 settings and at post-16 education, but also ensuring in schools that there's a career pathway support, which is really helpful. And yes, I know that that's an area that's really, going to be reflected very well in our implementation plan. So thank you for those additional comments. I think, see here,
Jerry, if I could just
Catherine.
I've also spotted that in the chat in response to the questions that Ben posed, and I just think it's worth acknowledging that all of those comments that have been put in there, we will be taking away from this session and working out where we can fit those into our implementation plan and ensuring that we've addressed those. I think the comment about career pathway support is a really good one, and I'm thinking about kind of our teams in the statutory SEND space, such as West and Community Connecting, and the really excellent work that happens there, and how we learn from the good practice from those teams and we're able to kind of upscale that and have more of that, and also linking with our careers hub, where they do work in our mainstream schools in Wiltshire, and ensuring that there's enough specialism in our mainstream schools to ensure that our children with additional needs who are supported in mainstream get the right sort of career pathway support that is ambitious, and also reflects what our children and young people are telling us that they want as part of their post-16 offer. And the reason I've sort of interrupted Jerry there is that it really does link back to that previous question that was asked, because we need to make sure that the provision we're growing in the post-16 space reflects what children and young people are telling us about their aspirations in terms of careers for post-16, so that we're growing provision that is matched to what children and young people and families are telling us about their ambitions and aspirations.
Thank you, Catherine. That's really helpful. There's a question here which is around the pathway through from an EHCP assessment to a tribunal process, asking around ways that we can learn from and improve our processes as a result of that experience, and asking how we will look into this as a way of learning. And it may be that we need to come back to that one and perhaps respond to it afterwards through the local offer responses we're going to be publishing. But it may be, I don't know, Catherine, whether, or Ben, you could answer that one, or at least indicate, who would support us with answering that question.
So I'll answer in terms of kind of our intent there. So I'll take that question away and liaise with our statutory send service, and I'll make a commitment that we'll get a response to that from this webinar, either available through the local offer or via this webinar when it's published. So please don't think we're ignoring that question. I just want to make sure that we're providing you with the latest and most accurate information.
Thank you, Catherine. And one here for Ben. How do you propose to build a collaborative connection with parents to remove barriers and improve the trust between Wiltshire Council and parent carers?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question, and probably one of the most vital questions that we need to answer as part of this plan. Because if we're not working collaboratively and building trust, then actually the rest of the strategy might as well not exist, because that's really one of the most important things. I think the honest answer, and it's not maybe the answer that the question asker was asking for, but the honest answer is that trust is built over time, and it's going to take time for us to build up that trust. But the really key things will be that we do what we say we're going to do, and that we're building those relationships and working on those relationships. And it's part of the reason that we are prioritising a strategic approach to talking to communication with parent carers, because communication is probably the first step on building a good trust relationship. But it will take time, and it's not something that will happen overnight, or that we can sort overnight. It's something that will require concerted effort over time to improve those relationships and build those relationships.
Thank you. That's really helpful, Ben. So I think probably we're almost done in terms of our question and answer section, but thank you very much for all those questions and indeed comments. We will be taking all those away. And I'm just looking at the questions that are in there, and just to reassure you, as we said earlier, that we are going to be sharing those questions and answers on our local offer pages. So, while we might have missed some of them because the chat was moving forward so quickly, we will be answering them all on our local offer. So do keep watch out for those. We'll be sending an alert out to publish them. So next slide, please. So really, just to wrap things up, thank you again, everyone, for joining us this afternoon, and for taking the time to share all your thoughts and your questions. I hope you have found that useful. We will be continuing with these webinars. We've had really good feedback, and they are really welcome. So, and one of the comments made by parent carers in feedback is that perhaps to focus on specific areas of our work, so that they are more tailored to particular interests and questions and queries. So that's something we've definitely taken on board and will be doing in the future. And of course, in terms of time of day, we'll continue to have these webinars during the daytime, but also we know that they are useful for people to be able to view in the evening, and to watch recordings of these webinars as well. So we're going to try and have these webinars as accessible as possible for you. So thank you once again, and we look forward to working with you as we move forward together. Thank you.